Chapter 25 Freedom from the Treadmill. Freedom is living your life as you want to live it. Many people feel that freedom is impossible because of the many hours required for work, because of their debts, and because they can't afford to live the way they would like to. The treadmill enslaves many people who can't conceive that life would be any different. They stay where they are, leaving things as they are, making changes only when someone else initiates them. But why should it be that way? You are a sovereign human being with numerous talents and a great many alternatives available to you. Whether you want to increase your income, reduce your working hours, get out of debt, or work in a less monotonous job, there is always a way. More than anything, the need is to use your imagination to look for alternatives. Several years ago, I faced a large debt that had to be paid off almost immediately. At the time, I was doing miscellaneous sales jobs for several different companies. I went to the manager of one of the companies and asked him what his worst problem was. What he told me was something that I couldn't do anything about. So I asked him what his second worst problem was. In reply, he explained the difficulty he was having because various administrative personnel weren't supporting the company's sales programs. I offered to give them a series of sales lectures, and he accepted the offer. I created a lecture series together with an incentive system that would reward the administrative personnel for their sales help. That one extra job led to another. After our initial discussion, the manager mentioned many other problems to me, and I had opportunities to solve some of them. Each problem meant extra money for me if I could solve it. The debt that had bothered me was paid off very quickly. I remember the incident well, because the day before I saw the manager, I was sulking in my living room, saying to myself, "There's nothing I can do." There is always something you can do, and usually the way to find out what you can do is to ask. Ask your employer or your customer what he needs right now more than anything else. He can probably name a dozen things, and one or more of them may be things you can do. Solving problems. Every problem you can solve means more money for you. A problem is a market for a solution. Be sensitive to the problems of everyone you do business with. If you don't see problems, ask about them. Almost everyone has irritating concerns that he would like to have out of the way. Treat each of these opportunities as a separate matter, with a separate fee for the solution of the problem, to be paid if you can solve it. To make the most of the opportunity, always handle the problem for a fee, never for an hourly wage. Find out what it would be worth to have the problem eliminated, and then decide if that price would be worth your time to do it. If you contract in terms of objectives rather than hours, you will probably find that your hourly income can be 2 or 3 times as much as it would have been otherwise. There are always plenty of opportunities of this kind around, more than enough to keep you busy without having to work for a salary or an hourly wage. Even during times of high unemployment, the person who looks for unsatisfied needs will always find numerous profitable alternatives. Always try to determine the self-interest of anyone you deal with. And the best way to discover that is to ask him, what does he need? Above all, remember that the person who's paying for the service decides what it's worth to him. Don't ever expect someone to pay for something unless he sees it as valuable to him. If you're sure he's being short-sighted, look for someone who appreciates your value. You are not a slave to anyone. You don't have to work for anyone, but neither is anyone a slave to you. You may feel your talents or skills are limited, but you would probably be surprised to find how many things you're capable of doing that other people would gladly pay for. Once you start asking what people would pay to have done, that may become apparent. It doesn't hurt to make a list of your talents, just to remind yourself. Include all the things you've ever worked at, along with your hobbies and the subjects you excelled at in school. When you look at your list, you might notice many things you could do for others that would be more rewarding than what you're doing now. Don't worry about college degrees and other credentials. When you offer to solve problems and be paid on the basis of results, customers are usually unconcerned about diplomas and other normal job qualifications. I know a number of executives who never went to college, salesmen and entrepreneurs who didn't finish high school, and professional men who never bothered to get licenses. They simply look for people who want value for their money and offer it to them. New jobs. Why should you spend the only life you have in a job that doesn't excite you? There are undoubtedly many other things you could do, if you are willing to look into them. Daydream. What did you always dream of doing while you were growing up? Is that still attractive to you now? If not, what do you dream of today? Whatever it may be, take your dreams seriously. Why shouldn't you at least try to make your life what you want it to be? Did you always want to paint? Why not try it now? Maybe you won't be a Rembrandt, but you might still be a good enough painter to make a decent living while doing what you want to do. You could even test it on the side without having to forsake your present job until you know what you can earn from your painting. Did you want to be a lion tamer? Maybe you could still be one. If not, you might be able to find another interesting job dealing with animals. Did you want to be a movie star? Even if you decide there's no hope for that, why couldn't you join a little theater group to see if you like acting and to determine if you have any talent? If you do, you could then look for something more professional. Why should you have to resign yourself to a life you don't care for? Free time. Would you like to work fewer hours? There's always a way to cut down on your working time without reducing your income. I mentioned earlier the contracting arrangement I made with my employees. I contracted with each of them for a specific result and no longer considered them as employees. Each former employee was then free to use his time in any way he chose. The only requirement was that he deliver the work on time. Every one of them performed his work in less time than he had before. Some of them used the new free time to make extra money elsewhere. Others enjoy the luxury of working fewer hours. You can use this principle in any kind of work. If you deal with customers or employers on the basis of results, you don't have to go on the payroll, nor do you have to punch a time clock or show up at the office. All your customer will demand is results. Your time will be free to plan as you choose. I know a number of people, engineers, accountants, salesmen, secretaries, executives, and others who would never dream of being on a company's payroll. They simply contact companies and offer to perform needed services for a given fee. They manage their own time and methods and never take on jobs they don't think will be interesting. They often perform jobs that are similar to what the company's employees are doing, but because they offer more than the employees do, they get better arrangements. When you solve problems and satisfy needs, you put yourself in a unique position. You are doing something for the customer that he isn't used to getting from others. The others are simply going along, taking orders, doing only what they're asked to do. They aren't looking for ways to be of greater value, so they don't enjoy greater income and opportunities. If you do, you will be a rare person. You will have a natural monopoly in your area. You will be irreplaceable in the eyes of someone because there will be no one as valuable at what you do. When you're in that position, you may be amazed at how easy it is to write your own ticket. I know a woman who works for a company in a big city. Since it's a large corporation, it has bureaucratic rules and traditions that normally defy individual arrangements. She has a second home outside the city, where she likes to spend her weekends, but the traffic problem makes it a struggle to get in and out of the city on weekends. Because she's unusually valuable to the company, she was able to arrange to be in the office only Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, so she can commute during times of little traffic. She does her work at her country home on Mondays and Fridays, and accomplishes more in that quiet setting than she could at the office. If she had asked her employer to grant her this request as a favor, he would have found plenty of reasons, regretfully, to turn her down. But because she's demonstrated many times over that she's unusually valuable, she has a natural monopoly in her job. Her work is far more important to the company than her presence in the office on Mondays and Fridays. There are always ways to arrange more free time if you're geared to thinking in terms of results. Results for the person paying you, and results for you. For example, you might be in a position to hire someone else to do the least important parts of your work. You would probably pay him less than you would have received for that work. You can then use the extra time to make more money or to enjoy yourself more. The keys to a non-treadmill life are to find out what other people will pay for and to recognize what you're capable of doing. Get in the habit of asking your employer and your customers what they need and they aren't getting. Get in the habit of thinking of things you would like to do but aren't doing now. Get in the habit of making changes that give you time to enjoy life more. Debts. Too often, an individual remains on the treadmill because he has too many debts to allow him to reduce his working hours. A great deal of freedom is lost when you have to spend the present paying off the past. I have never liked debt. I've had plenty of it, and I dislike the way it immobilizes. To me, freedom includes the opportunity to spend money as I choose, to spend it at the time I receive it. When I was much younger, I was once so deep in debt that I thought it was foolish to even think I would never be out of it. I don't believe in bankruptcy, so I thought I was stuck for life. One day I totaled all my obligations and found that I owed $13,000. Because I was making very little money at the time, the amount seemed so enormous that I thought it was pointless to pay $50 or $100 against it. But I also began to feel that there wasn't anything more important to me than getting rid of it. I resolved to try to reduce it by some amount during the next couple of months. If the effort were to make my life too miserable, I could always go back to my old spending habits. But for 2 months, I would concentrate on the task. I kept a running total of my debt and reduced the total every time I made a payment against it. At the end of the first month, I had lowered it by only $400. That meant it would take over 2 years to liquidate the whole amount. But it was fun to see the total go down. Before long, no purchase was as exciting as buying a position of less debt. I was inspired to take on extra jobs because every fee I earned meant a reduction of the total. If it became necessary to replace a household item, I did it in the cheapest possible way, knowing I could always improve upon it later. For now, cutting the debt was my most compelling motivation. Once a momentum was created, the debt shrank faster and faster. Finally, I was totally out of debt, 7 months after I believed it would be impossible to ever get out of debt. I happily gave up the austerity budget and went out and splurged on new clothing, dinners, and dates, paying cash, of course. What I did isn't necessarily what you will do. Possibly it would be more difficult for you. But I cite the experience as an example of how wrong it can be to think there is no way out. There is always a way out, once you make up your mind what is most important to you. If it is important to you to be debt-free, then work extra hours, cut out non-essential spending for a while, or sell items you don't need. Find a way to put yourself in the position you would like to be in. If you know why you're doing it, and it's important to you to do it, you won't mind the temporary austerity. Small prices. I've also found that I'm better off, during good times or bad, by never worrying about small sums of money. John Kamen, publisher of The Forecaster, once told me that he never worried about any price under $10. He would pay for anything under $10 without considering his budget or the possibility that it might be a waste. If someone created a dispute about $10, he would pay it without arguing. Once he told me this, I realized that I had been doing the same thing. I've always disregarded small sums because it seemed a waste of time to argue over them or worry about them. After hearing John's rule, I set for myself a conscious limit of $100. If I ever find that the limit costs me more than it saves me, I can adjust it. Until then, I refuse to ponder restaurant prices, repair bills, or any other small expenditures. Meanwhile, I see people who will spend hours, if not weeks, pondering a $15 expenditure. They feel they have to because of their limited means. They never consider that their means are limited partly because of the time they waste over pennies. Such choices are subjective, of course. Some people love to shop for bargains, but many people think they're doing so out of necessity. They may be costing themselves more than they're saving, though. Freedom from such concerns is important to me. I would much rather spend my time listening to a Puccini opera than trying to choose between a $5 item and an $8 item. Your decisions. Your life is yours to spend as you choose. You don't have to be involved in a family. You don't have to be successful. If any of those things are a part of your life, it should be only because you choose them. There are no rules for what your life should be. When you decide what you want, it's important to recognize that there are many things you want. You can envision many more desirable alternatives than you could possibly satisfy in a lifetime. Desires always exceed resources. That's why you choose to satisfy the desires most important to you. It's essential to realize that you can't have everything. You can't do everything. There's always a price, and the price can be expressed in the alternatives that must be given up for something. There are many things you could do with your life, but which ones do you want most? What would you be willing to give up in order to advance your career, to become famous, to be wealthy? Are you willing to set aside the next 20 years of your life for the possibility that you may become wealthy? Are you willing to forgo the leisure, the entertainment, the family life, and other things most people take for granted? Always view your desires within the context of your whole life. There is an unlimited number of things you can do to make money. But that's the point. Since there is an unlimited number, you have to draw the line somewhere. It's unrealistic to say that you will do anything you have to make money. To say that is to give up everything else in life that you might enjoy. So it's best to draw limits at the beginning, limits that are appropriate to your own nature. If you do that, you will be less likely to be burdened by thoughts of what you could have done to make more money. You will know what you received in place of the extra earning hours. I've always wanted to be rich, but I've always been very lazy, too. One day, I had it out with myself and decided that, given a choice, I would prefer a lower financial status to working long hours at something I didn't enjoy. I still wanted money for the things it could buy, but I established limits beyond which I wouldn't go to acquire wealth. I defined them clearly, and they were compatible with what I knew about myself. So I never had to feel guilty when I wasn't working. For the past few years, I've worked only at things I've generally enjoyed. I knew that it was better to do that, no matter what the monetary return, than to commit myself to a lifetime of intense effort and joyless drudgery. Perhaps it isn't surprising that I've made far more money during these past few years than I ever made before, for I'm much more valuable doing what I enjoy than I am doing what is distasteful to me. If it hadn't turned out that way, I wouldn't be sorry. I made a choice that was appropriate to my nature, and I was quite willing to live by it, no matter what the monetary result. I knew I would never be happy living any other way. If you're not willing to give up the things that you enjoy, accept that and don't waste your time and attention pining over what you should have done to be more successful. Establish a set of priorities, place limits upon the effort you'll make to be professionally successful, and then remind yourself of those limits whenever you're tempted to be regretful. On the other hand, if wealth and achievement are what you do want, more than parties, friendships, love affairs, family activities, more than anything, then recognize that and accept it. Do what is necessary to succeed, and don't let anyone browbeat you with accusations that you're self-centered or greedy. Do what you want to do, but recognize there are many things you want to do, and you can't have them all. So establish priorities in your values and stick to the ones at the top. When you have to give up lesser values, don't waste your time bemoaning the loss of what could have been obtained only by giving up something more valuable. The future. Another way many people keep themselves on the treadmill is by being preoccupied with the future. It's easy to justify a rigorous schedule in the present as an investment in the future. Many people work long hours, put up with disagreeable effects of their work, and forego enjoyments, all because it promises a brighter future. But what if the future never comes? Who knows what will happen to the economy, to your ability to enjoy yourself, to the things you had planned to spend your money for? I don't believe in committing my future to pay for indulgences of the present. But neither will I sacrifice today for a vague, indefinite tomorrow. I could die next week. What then would be the worth of my well-laid plans for 20 years from now? It makes sense to enjoy yourself at the time when you're best able to do so, mentally and physically. At 65, the luscious dreams of today may not be so attractive. So leave 65 to be handled at 65. Do what you can to be sure you can provide for yourself then, but don't put off your dreams until then. The time to be free, to start living, to enjoy yourself, is right now. Now is the time when you can best appreciate the unplanned hours that can be enjoyed as you choose at each moment. If you don't have any free time or money, do something about that. If you don't know where your time and money are going, stop everything and check your expenditures and activities carefully. Find out how you're spending your life. Get rid of all the non-essentials, especially those that are vague investments in the future. Don't feel that you have to give 60 hours a week to your work, unless that's what you enjoy most. Be free to act upon the opportunities as they arise, free to take advantage of the things you've wanted to do. Find ways to satisfy your dreams. After all, what is life for? If it's really just a veil of tears, what's the point in being alive? I believe that life is meant to be enjoyed, to be tasted, or there isn't any point to it. I have found ways to live freely and joyously because I am convinced there is no other reason for living. I didn't become free by working 60 hours a week, except during very brief periods when there were immediate and important rewards for doing so. I didn't become free by accepting the routine that others expected of me. There will be plenty of people to tell you that you must go along with things as they are, that you have no right to expect a happier, easier life, that there are other people who have less than you do. But so what? There's so much to be had from life. There's pleasure and satisfaction and love and entertainment and excitement. And there are enjoyable ways of earning a living. And there are adventures, uncommitted hours, challenges, and happy surprises. Use your imagination. Look for alternatives. Don't settle for less than the kind of life you need to make it worth having lived.